Hello, and welcome to Research 101, a new webinar series where we'll take a ride down the how-to highway with subject matter experts to learn tips and tricks that will help take your research farther and faster. My name is Enrica Ziller, Research Education Programs and Outreach Manager in the Office of Research at the University of Texas at Dallas. I will be your moderator. As we move through today's session, please post your questions at any time to the Q&A chat for our guest speakers to address. With us today are contract and grant specialists Matthew Kilgore and Simon Butcher from the Office of Sponsored Programs. Together with Associate Director Emily Lacey, they will provide valuable information on how to write your NIH Progress Report. Matthew, will you start things off?
Hey, thank you for joining us, everyone. We're talking about progress reports today, specifically for NIH, the National Institutes of Health. Progress reports are required annually to document grantee accomplishments and compliance with the terms of the award under Uniform Guidance 2 CFR 200, Section 328. They describe scientific progress, they identify significant changes, report on personnel, and describe plans for the subsequent budget period or year. There are 3 different types of RPPRs, or resource reports. There are annual reports, there are final reports, there are interim reports. An interim RPPR is used when you're submitting a renewal application. If that renewal is not funded, then the interim report will serve as the final RPPR for the project. There is no RPPR form available for download. It has to be submitted through the ERA Commons, and that's one of NIH's portals, so it has to be submitted through that portal. Only you, a principal investigator, can initiate an RPPR, but a signing official from the university, like Simon or myself here today, or one of our colleagues in OSP, a signing official must sign and submit the RPPR electronically on your behalf. So, streamlined non-competing award process, or SNAP for short, RPPRs, are due 45 days before the next budget period start date. Non-SNAP RPPRs, they're due 60 days before the next budget period start date. A final RPPR would be due 120 days from the period of performance end date. Failure to submit a progress report in a timely manner can delay funding for the subsequent year of the project. So it really is important to keep those due dates in mind. Again, most of the time it's going to be 45 days. You're going to be on a non-competing award. Most of our awards here at the university, so 45 days before the next period start date. I'm going to go to Simon now. We actually have an RPPR open that we can walk through inside the ERA Commons here on the screen share. And there are usually 7 elements you'll see: A, B, C, D, E, etc. So Simon's going to start us off in section A, the cover page here.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Matthew. Hopefully everybody can see this cover page screen that I'm sharing. There's not a whole lot for you to do on this first page, but there's a few things I just wanted to highlight. Really, you just need to check the information that's included and make sure you're dealing with the correct award. If you have a few different awards from NIH and you are coming to do this report 45 or 60 days before the actual end of the period, it's important to make sure you're giving all the information on the correct report. And you can check that by looking at the award number and the project title. Scrolling further down, you'll see they also list the reporting period on this cover page. That's important to remember, particularly when you come to do the final RPPR. If you've received a no-cost extension, you may end up with a reporting period that's more than 1 year. You may have 2 years to report on, and so all your information is going to reflect that. Your monthly efforts, your accomplishments, all the things we're going to look at shortly, they'll actually be for that 2-year period. At the same time, if you've received an award and it's for a period of that first budget period might be less than 12 months. And so again, they want you to be very specific on what you're addressing in the report is for this reporting period, not cumulative necessarily for most things. You know, as you go through the report, it's just for that one specific period. And then you can also see in the next section, it tells you what budget period you're going to be requesting next by submitting this report. And again, if you kind of project any issues in the coming 12 months, it's again important to be clear on which periods you're dealing with. The final element of this cover page, as Matthew mentioned, is the signing official and the admin official. It can be set up this way, you know, with Emily as the signing official and one of the grants and contract specialists as the admin official. But you'll see we do, you know, a number of us have that signing official role. So depending on how people do it, you may see the same name listed there. You may see different names. The reason it's always good to pick the person that you're working with on the report for the admin official is if there's any further follow-up communication from NIH after the report's being submitted, or you're trying to chase, or if we're trying to chase a future notice of award, if you know we send NIH an email and they you know already link our name to the report that was submitted, it might help things. So that's a good reason, just to make sure you've got kind of right person selected, and we can change these things once you know we get involved in reviewing the report. So that's the cover page. I'm going to move across the accomplishments section now. So hopefully that will follow along with me in a second. Accomplishments is where you're really reporting on most of what you did. This is kind of the science page where you'll have the most to say, and we'll be making sure that what you've included is correct, but we probably won't have too many comments when we get to our review stage, especially when it gets to, you know, some of these initial points. So I'll work through them, and Matthew, you can always jump in if you have any additional comments, let me know. So section B1, what are the major goals of the project? The goals are basically equivalent to your specific aims. You'll need to enter these, you know, copy and paste or type them in when you do the first RPR after your RPPR after your first year of your project. But then for subsequent years, you'll see they auto-populate, and unless you need to change them, unless there's been major changes, you know, you don't need to do anything further in this section, but it does provide you with a box to address that if needs be. Then it moves on to section B2, and this is where you'll attach what you've accomplished under the goals. As you'll see there, it says they recommend not to exceed 2 pages. I've seen things formatted and presented in different ways. It's always good to stick with the general NIH formatting approach. It carries over from your proposals, but I've seen different approaches accepted. Generally 2 pages should be sufficient. I've seen people use more and it not be an issue. I've seen people use less, and that's fine, as long as it's applicable to what happened on your project during that last year. And as well, without going into too much detail, if you follow the main 3 points they list there, activities, objectives, and significant results, if you touch on those items and attach something that looks good, you should be fine there.
And as Simon mentioned, you have some flexibility with how you like to present this information. Formatting when it comes to page margins, font sizes, those need to follow the same instructions that you did, the same NIH guidance that applies to all documents that are submitted. So.
Yeah, great. So this section B3 doesn't get used too often, but it can definitely be applicable if you've received a supplement during the reporting period. And the key thing to remember here is that you do need to report on your supplement separately to the rest, you know, to your main award. You just fill in there's no separate attachments. They just want you to put in the details in these text boxes. And as you can see, they expect it probably to be a briefer summary than for your main award, which they want in the attachment for. So then moving on to B4, this is an area where we do sometimes see a report forwarded to us for review and submission, and where we quite often go back to you to ask that something be included. You'll see that NIH guidelines says that it's encouraged for most awards. You know, if anything that way you need to report on graduate student or postdoctoral participants, anybody that you might want to talk about how they have been given opportunities for training and professional development. From what we've seen from NIH and from what we'd like to see, really, if although it's encouraged, we would even go beyond that and say it's strongly encouraged. We would suggest that you include that section for any kind of award if you've got the relevant people to be talking about. The report could go in without it if it's not required for the particular award type, but we always like to see it in there. We think it's important for that to be in there, so that would be great. But for certain awards, like training and fellowship-based awards, it is a required element. And you actually, the guidance for those kind of awards is a lot more specific in the instructions for the reports. It'll give you a lot more bullet points that you need to hit, and the individuals that you need to provide this information for. So for those types, it lists there the T's and the F's, particularly the K's, R25s. You'll need to go into a lot more detail. For all of the reports, you just you can be general, you can be specific to individuals, or you can be general across role types. You can approach it kind of how you'd like, but you do need to put something from what we've seen from NIH. B5 is generally not required. You'll know through your award document, from the proposal that you submitted, whether some sort of special dissemination of results is applicable and whether you need to report on it. It's from the awards I'm used to seeing and the reports we've submitted, I haven't really encountered people needing to use B5 too often, but you would know from the project that you're undertaking and the award document if you had to do that section or not. And then B6 is the final section of this accomplishments page. As the directions say, you just briefly describe what you plan to do during the next reporting period. One important thing to remember is that any kind of significant changes to your scope or your approach is something that would require prior approval. So yes, while you can address sort of things here, there's other elements within the report as well where you can address that, but this isn't really an opportunity to say, you know what, actually, I'm not going to use animals for this project. I'm going to do something else. Not that would ever happen, but you know, as an extreme example, you know, you don't want to be doing that here. We'd want to be already talked about that, and probably would have needed to submit a prior approval request if there was any drastic change in scope before we got to the stage of submitting the RPPR for next year. So that's a very quick overview of Section B accomplishments. Matthew, did you have anything to add on that section?
No, just to point out what you've already gone over, some of these questions will allow you to attach a PDF attachment. That's generally the case when there's an opportunity to provide a more detailed response. And some of these questions, like that final question, what do you plan to do during the next period? Instead of a PDF attachment, they give you a text box, and that's because they're limiting your response. So you can tell some of these questions, they want 8,000 characters, and that's not a very long response at all. That's very brief. And other times you'd be able to elaborate and upload a PDF, perhaps 2 pages long, page to 2 page, say, for example, if you're describing those training opportunities that Simon went over at B4.
Yeah, I think for this part, you know, there's the 2 main attachments that people kind of focus on, and they forget that there's all these other elements, these text boxes that make up the report. So yeah, you've got your accomplishments upload and your training and professional development opportunity uploads. Those are really the main 2, until we get later on, if there's been any changes to personnel and things like that. Those are the 2 main uploads that you'll be considering, but don't forget there's all these other text boxes and check boxes for you to work on. So we'll move on to then to section C, products.
Yeah, let's talk about the next section. Section C is products, and this really gets at the heart of research. Here you have an opportunity to list your publications, websites, technologies, inventions, patents, other products. All of those 5 are going to make up the sections here on this page for products. C1 publications is this is critical because NIH does have a public access policy. So all publications listed here at the top of this product section need to be compliant with that NIH public access policy. That means you need to include the PubMed Central ID in these citations here. When we see that PMC ID, we know it's compliant. If we don't see that, we can expect an error, a warning is going to come up on this progress report before we submit saying, hey, something's not compliant on the publications. That can happen with a really recent publication. It may not have the PubMed ID yet. In that case, we do have to follow up after the progress report and make sure that those are brought into compliance with the public access policy. If not, we will get a little nastygram from your grant management specialist on the NIH side. And again, back to the cover page in section A, where Simon said, please do list your contact. If it's Simon working with you on this progress report, please do list him as the admin contact in a case like this. If one of your products listed in C1 publications wasn't compliant, they would send us an email. We would know right away that that's something we need to address. They give us a very brief time period in which we need to bring those into compliance with the public access policy. And if that's not done, they're going to prohibit you from spending anything. They may issue an award just to extend your end date, but they'll put a special term and condition in there. We have seen this recently. They'll put in a condition for your next increment of funding saying none of these funds, with the exception of maintaining animal health and welfare or something like that, none of these funds can be touched until that public access policy is compliant for C1 publications. So you do navigate here back and forth with your bibliography in CBI, and there's a list there where you can select and pull them into list right here. C2 is websites. Here you have another example of limited response. This is just a text box to enter a very brief 2,000 character response in if you have a website you want to describe that's part of this project, one of the products of this project, I mean to say. Section C4, the next question, asks about inventions, patent applications, and or licenses. And invention disclosures here are going to be another hot issue. It is a yes or no question. Have inventions resulted from the award during this reporting period? If not, it's very simple response. If yes, your grant management specialist is going to make sure to communicate with our Office of Technology here on campus at UTD, have them follow up with you. We'll say, hey, a PI on this project has indicated in a progress report that there are inventions to disclose. We want to make sure those have been disclosed to your office. And where applicable, we need to make sure those are entered into iEdison so that those inventions with federal funds are compliant with that reporting policy. Again, we will get a response from the grant management specialist at NIH if we say, yes, inventions resulted, they check iEdison, and they don't see that any inventions have been disclosed there in their system. So if you say yes, we're going to follow up with the Office of Technology, and they're going to coordinate with you, loop everybody in just to make sure that we're getting all of our required disclosures in place. So sometimes there's a lot that goes on in the world of research, in the world of reporting and compliance, a lot that goes on around these progress reports. Another reason to get started early on some of these, especially if you're going to say yes to inventions, or up earlier on the form if you're going to have a publication that maybe is not compliant, it needs to be brought into compliance with the public access policy. Last thing asked for on this section of products is other products and resource sharing. So not a long text box here. Again, you're limited to 2,000 characters, but it's going to let you describe any other products that are coming out of this research that you want to highlight here in the report. So the next section after these products is for participants. Here, I'm going to kick it back to Simon to talk about how we report on those people involved in the working on the research with you.
Thanks. So yeah, this is a section that does require quite a bit of pre-preparation in a way to gather all your information on the various personnel that have worked on the project during the last year, both internally at UTB or any subawards as well, because one thing we may not have mentioned so far, but this report is for the full award. So any subawards, they're incorporated into this report. We report on their information too, and so all that personnel, we need the information for them as well. The first section is kind of hard to squeeze all onto the screen here, but you basically use this little form to add all the personnel, and after the first year, they will kind of carry over from the previous years, which is good and bad, because then you've got some people on there already. You don't have to put all the information in, but then they may be on there, you don't need them, but you forget you don't need them. So you've got to pay attention to who's listed, and still got to go in and add their person month information yourselves. Just some kind of overarching points about this first section, D1. So you provide an information for the PI and anyone that has worked one person month during the reporting period. And you report up to a decimal place of one decimal place. In the instructions, and NIH still hasn't updated the instructions, it still says you report whole numbers, but now they actually, the system will take and it wants to one decimal place. So you can say 1.5, you can say 0.8, and that isn't quite important when people start reducing or increasing effort by certain percentages. For key personnel, or key personnel that are named in the award document, so PIs or anybody else that's explicitly named on your award notice, those individuals, you're not allowed to reduce your effort in a reporting period by 25% or more than 25% without prior approval. So it's important that the effort that we report for those people matches what was proposed, what was awarded, and not an excessive reduction unless it's already been addressed with NIH. And so that's something that we will also be helping to check to see, how many months have you put into this table versus what we were expecting to see based on, what was proposed originally, and if there's been any approval requests to make a reduction. One of the key things where we sometimes find an error, this is the section that often generates the most errors that will prevent us from being able to submit the report straight away, and that's that any personnel with a graduate student role, undergraduate student role, or postdoc, they need to have a Commons ID created in advance, because their profile needs to be completed to a sufficient level that their education and their personal details are provided in that profile, so so that the account will show as fully active, and we list them. I'm going to try really quick to just show you a little bit of how this works. So if I type in my name and populate from profile, it brings up my details. I can pick myself the role of a graduate student. I can give myself 1 month effort on this project, and then I click add. And I guess I missed the required field. Oh, here we go. The primary affiliation, is it foreign? So now, no, I won't take it either, but I'm not a key personnel. As you can see, it's a sensitive form, especially when you don't know what you're doing, like me. So anyway, we add you add people in that manner. The reason I wanted to do that is because if you need to make an update, say you put 1 month and then you realize that wasn't quite right, or you click graduate student, but actually, I worked as a technician. You click on the edit button, and then you change it to a technician. And now technician is a role that quite frequently is used, and maybe by a grad student. But if they're not on the project as a graduate student, then that requirement for the Commons ID goes away. So that can help in certain situations. But once you make a change, you have to click Add New again to get the line to update, which I think is a step that's not entirely clear. And often people will send a report saying, I'm trying to add people, I'm trying to edit their information. I keep hitting save at the very bottom of the screen, and it's just not working. It's because you've got to click Add New first to edit. I'll delete myself from there. So there's a lot involved in D1, but I also know we've got to keep moving for time. Matthew, did you have anything to add on that? I would just emphasize, subaward personnel is key, and you've got to plan ahead to reach out. If you don't already know from your collaborators what their personnel are working and have that idea, if you're going to need to touch base with the admin side of a subawardee, we got to give plenty of time to get that information from them before we need to submit the report. Sorry, Matthew.
No, I agree completely. Just to underscore that point, I will often ask a principal investigator to start with this section. Just completely agree with Simon here. It tends to take the most time. We've got grad students come and go at the university all the time. And so we do find ourselves regularly setting up these new Commons accounts for them. We can list a name here once we have a Commons ID, and Simon or I can create a Commons ID for a grad student, but for privacy reasons, we cannot fill out his or her profile. So it's going to show up just fine here on the report until we're all done, ready to submit, and then it's going to create an error and say, the ERA comment system is trying to populate information from that person profile. And if that person profile has not been completed by the grad student himself, then we're going to get an error on this form, and we can't submit this progress report until he or she goes in and answers required questions. Degree, nationality, there's a couple of half dozen questions. It's real quick, they're marked with an asterisk, but the grad student does have to see that email. Okay, here's my login, here's my temporary password. I need to fill out required questions on my profile. Yeah, and that's key. And sometimes, like Matthew says, they've gone already, and it can be a real effort to get them to do it. So maybe even before you start thinking about your report, if you just know you're adding somebody, it can be part of your process for bringing on somebody new to your project. And you grad student, just get them to set up that account there and then, because if they end up working more than a month on your project, they'll need to be reported. So moving on to D2A, level of effort. The only thing I want to make clear here is that this is a requesting prior approval for a reduction in effort for a future budget period, for the next 12 months potentially, not kind of asking for forgiveness, so to speak, for what you may have done in the previous 12 months. So this isn't, you put information here, it's not going to approve you for a reduction that you're maybe an effort that you're reporting in this report. It's for the coming budget period. And so we don't often use this section, but I just wanted to make it clear it's not something that you can kind of ask for, that sort of backdate after the fact in this section. Section D2B and D2D, we don't, are not commonly used. We don't see those too much in the report period. People, new senior key personnel and significant contributors do get added, and we could definitely address that in the report, but they're not, common to everybody at that particular time. However, D2C, changes in other support, is more commonly used in the report, and it's required if you have a previously active grant that has terminated, or if a previously pending grant is now active, if it's become active. So kind of a change to, well, like it says in the active support. So it's not just across the board, has there been any change to your current and pending, because if you've just got a new pending, you don't necessarily have to do it. Now you should update, if you're updating your document anyway and you're doing it for active,
then you should just update, because this is like a real key area of focus for NIH and for all sponsors right now, as I'm sure you realize by the amount of emails that come out on this topic over the last 12 months or more now. So it's important that it's accurate and up to date, but the key times that you might need to attach something here is if you've had a change to that active support. They also give you an option at the last section of this form to update any changes in your your multi-PI leadership plan. So if you've got an MPI award and there's any changes to how you're handling things and you want to provide that update, this is the spot to do it in section D. Next is section E, impact, and I'll pass it back to Matthew for that one.
Yeah, so the next two sections actually, impact is going to be section E, and then changes is going to be section F. They're pretty self-explanatory, but we do want to, just for the sake of thoroughness, go through here as well. The E1 impact seems to always be not applicable. I don't even recall exactly what that question is supposed to be. The first question is always one that doesn't apply to anybody. E2 is really where this form starts. What is the impact on physical, institutional, or information resources that form infrastructure? It is fine to say nothing to report. That's commonly what we see. But again, they're giving you a text box here. If you have a brief explanation, could be entered there. 3 is again also not applicable, but 4 ask what dollar amount of the award is being spent in a foreign country. So on a fairly self-explanatory form that you might fly through because some questions are just marked as not applicable, and question 2 is, well, I'm not really impacting the physical site, so I'm going to say nothing to report. Don't sleep on this last question because it is key. They want to know about expenditures in foreign countries because NIH is very concerned about monitoring foreign collaborations. They want to know if there's travel to a foreign site. They want to know if there's a foreign supplier for parts or any kind of vendor. They would know already if there's a foreign subaward, although if we've added one, of course, then we have dollars spent in a foreign country. If there's nothing to report, it's very easy to move on. If there is something to disclose here, you provide the amount and select from the drop-down menu that country. Okay, but again, this is part of NIH monitoring for collaboration, so it is really something. If we have spent money in foreign countries, it will show up on our financial reporting. They will cross this report, this progress report, with those financial reports. So if you've got invoices from a foreign supplier that are hitting your cost center, we need to disclose that here for the reporting period. Okay, and I'll go on to section F, changes. We'll see some pretty obvious questions. They want to know here on this form, just in general, if there's changes in the approach and the reason for that change. They want to know if there's an actual or anticipated problem, and they want to see a plan to resolve it. They want to know about changes that have a significant impact on expenditures. So you can see F2, that's the question for actual or anticipated challenges. Again, they're not asking for a long response. You do not upload a PDF of 2 pages here. You've got 8,000 characters, okay? So they're not really expecting you to report anticipated changes. But we are now living and working in a COVID-affected world. We've seen a lot of requests for no-cost extensions. We've seen delays caused by limited access to research labs this year. So I think now more than ever, it's a good time to pause here at this question and maybe, again, you're limited to 8,000 characters, but maybe say, yeah, the scope of work is unchanged, but there were delays in this period. At the same time, this question does want to see a plan to resolve that, okay? And it's got to be very brief. If there are any significant changes to those important compliance areas of human subjects, vertebrate animals, biohazards, any changes to these kind of controlled topics here in F3, you would attach a longer explanation here. So this is a PDF attachment separate for human subjects, vertebrate animals, biohazards, whichever might apply. We would attach a PDF there describing changes to the work with human subjects. Again, all of that is closely considered, so they want a little more detailed response. That is the end of section F, the last question about changes. And the next section is a large one. Special reporting requirements catches several topics of interest, another form that your grant and contract specialist at UTD will want to look closely at with you. I'll start, and I'll probably ask Simon to jump in and talk about some of the things that we've both experienced on this form, help you avoid pitfalls. But G1, first question here on here is about special notice of award terms. Here they're referring to the notice of award, the award document. If there were special terms and conditions there, you have a platform here, a space in your yearly reporting to address special concerns that were in the NOA. And again, it's a PDF attachment. You're not limited to one of those small text boxes, because depending on what kind of award it is, the circumstances in which it's awarded, there may have been any number of special terms and conditions. But that's something we'll look back at the award document with you and see if we need to address. The next sections are not applicable until we get to human subjects. And yes or no here will affect some of the questions that come up after it. So if I say, Simon, if I answer yes, does the project involve human subjects on G4, what happens in the next question underneath it? Is that something I need to worry about?
Yeah, well, so for that, if human subjects are applicable, what's going to happen is you're going to click that little link that says human subjects, and it's going to jump you into a different part of the NIH system. It's going to take you to Assist, where you're going to have to update your human subjects kind of post-submission study records. And for the most part, unless there's been any major changes to the way your project's operating, for the most part, you're just updating your enrollment numbers for your human subjects. And it looks very similar to how we did it. We would have done it with the proposal. You know, you can, faculty, whoever's doing the report, they can click the link, they can go into Assist and do it themselves, add in the numbers. It's there's a few steps involved. You have to update. It's almost like you're submitting something again. You have to submit it, and then once you do that in the Assist side, it will update the report here in the Commons side. You can provide us with the numbers, and we can help update those enrollment tables, because sometimes the steps for getting that completed within Assist can be a little bit convoluted. But that's basically what will happen, unless there's you know, that G5 with the human subjects education part as well. I've seen that. You know, details provided on that if somebody else is, you know, if there's been changeover in staff or something like that. Is that what you were, that kind of process, what you're interested in there, Matthew?
That's exactly what I was thinking of, and I'm glad you touched on G5 too for the human subject education requirement. You listed participants earlier in section D. Simon and I both talked about making sure everyone has a commons account. I said, you know, those grad students come through the university. They have a habit of graduating on us in the middle of an important research project, and we hire new ones. Here is an opportunity. Here it's a required place where we need to say, these grad students who just joined the project, maybe they're new to the university, but they have completed their required training on human subjects, and we would actually
Yeah, I would actually say as well, so for G2, it says not applicable for this award. It would have been an R or 1, but G2 would be the responsible conduct of research, attachment or information for fellowship or K. Yeah, so like some kind of fellowship award, where the fellow would need to provide details on what kind of responsible conduct of research training and experience they've received during the period. So in that kind of situation, that's when G2 would pop up, and it's also related to that, RCR elements.
We would expect the next question about human embryonic stem cells to be a no. There are, of course, questions under vertebrate animals are next. And a pretty easy question about the project performance sites. We just want to make sure UT Dallas is listed here. If there are any subawards, they'll auto-populate and be listed here as well. Next question is going back to foreign components again, right? Because, I said before when previously the report asked about expenditures, foreign expenditures. Here again, NIH keeping a close eye on foreign influence. That's been a hot topic in research, so they want to know details about foreign components here, defined as a significant scientific activity outside the United States, and that's just in case you can't read that print on the report here, just the first text line under foreign components. They give you a couple of examples of other grant-related activities that may be significant. If there's none, if the work is all being done here, if your collaborators are all on campus or in the United States, then you get to check that no foreign components box and move on. If there is a foreign institution that you're collaborating with, a visiting scientist from a foreign institution working here on our campus, then we would provide the organization name and country for that foreign component. Next in G10 is estimated unobligated balance, and this is one your specialist here at UTD wants to look at very closely with you. We do, under our expanded authorities with NIH on most of these awards, we're going to be able to carry forward a balance, but we do have to pause and report here on that balance, on how much we're spending. This is in addition to the financial reporting that goes in. This is part of your project report where you need to say here, yes or no, is there an unobligated balance greater than 25% of the current year's total approved budget? It's a little bit of a unique formula they use there. If you have any questions, if you're close to that threshold, let's discuss that sooner rather than later. Let's get started soon on the report if you know there's been delays in spending. We always want to make sure our awards are spent down. But here though, it's not just what shows up. We'll ask the Office of Post-Award Management for a balance sheet on the award, but this isn't just limited at all times to what's on that, because you may have some expenses floating out there that just haven't been approved yet, and that's why they're not showing up on that cost center report. You may have encumbrances to a subaward. We're waiting for their invoice to be signed off and approved. So there's cases where we'll look at cost center report from OPM, but we'll ask you to verify that as well. We'll talk with you about how close we are to that threshold. We want to be able to report no significant carryover. We want to be able to say no, it's not greater than 25%. If there is a significant balance, then in that text box at G10B, we need to provide an explanation for that. And they do not want a long-winded explanation. They give you one of the shorter text box here, about 700 characters, to provide an explanation for the unobligated balance. Here, if you have a lot to say, maybe we think back about tabbing to that, tab F changes or something there where we can provide some more information. But the expectation from the NIH is that these awards are spent down in a timely manner. So we hope that we can report no, there's no significant unobligated balance. We hope we don't have to provide an explanation. But if we do have a balance, that's a progress report that we want to start looking at early and thinking about how we formulate our response and how that ties into maybe across some other sections of the reporting here. And the next question, the next text box with it, C, is, if authorized carryover the balance, provide a general description of how the funds will be spent. So just a slightly different wording there. The text box above it was an explanation for the unobligated balance. So explain why you have funds unspent. This specifically is saying provide a plan to spend those funds. Okay. So slightly different question. But again, not a long answer, not a PDF attachment, but a short text box. I don't remember the last time we very rarely see program income. Simon, have you had any recently reporting program income? No, I haven't had anything that's required G11, which is nice for us when it comes to doing the report. Yeah, we really don't anticipate program income. We're not a for-profit entity. F&A costs will round out the questions in this section. And it's yes or no. The first part of it is a yes or no question. Is there a change in the performance sites that will affect F&A? We hope to say no. Even when UTD, renegotiates their rate agreements, if you see that our rate agreement has changed, that's not what this question is asking. The scenarios in which you would say yes, that something is changing, the change that affects F&A costs would be very, very limited. I'm just going to say for our general audience here, we would expect to say no. And if you think you're in a scenario where you might answer yes, let's talk about that in the specifics, maybe outside of this, specifics of your award or your project. Simon, is there anything else you want to add to that section G?
No, I agree that people will probably have very specific questions about their scenarios for the unobligated balance carryover and how that works. The only thing I would very quickly add is that even if you say no unobligated balance, certain grants and management specialists at NIH are looking at the drawdown too. So just keep in mind, how does your drawdown match with your obligated balance, and maybe if there's a disconnect there, be prepared that they maybe have follow-up questions. But no, I think that summarizes section G pretty well. I'll click on section H, but as you mentioned previously about the SNAP, this is pretty much never applicable to the majority of the awards that we do, right? I mean, unless you have anything to add on the H, I think we don't need to address that at this time.
We would expect not to have to fill anything for section H because, like you just said, I mean, most of our awards are going to be streamlined. There may be one more section in cases where you're submitting a final progress report. There'll be one more section, section I, where you list your outcomes, and it is just one question in that section. if this is marked as a final report in the last year of your research, they're just going to ask you what were the outcomes of the award. So that would be the only difference between, or that would be the significant difference between an annual and a final report is that extra section. So that's the sections in ERA Commons for the Research Performance Progress Report.
Thank you, Matthew and Simon and Emily, for taking the time to walk us through this important documentation today. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today, and we hope to see you shortly in the Extra Mile session. Thanks.